She won't speak, not to the child psychologist, not to her father, not to anyone, except for her, the nanny he fired last week. Now, in a penthouse overlooking Seoul, a crime lord is facing a reality his money and power can't fix. His 6-year-old daughter has gone mute, a trauma response so severe she's locked inside herself, and the only person she will talk to is the young black woman he dismissed without a second thought. This is Elena Reyes, 28, trained in child trauma therapy, the former live-in nanny for one of Seoul's most feared underworld figures. And this is Minjun's nightmare. His daughter Jae has retreated into a wall of silence called selective mutism, a direct result of the violence she witnessed. The only thread connecting her to the world is the woman her father deemed expendable. So now he must ask the impossible of her, come back and do what no one else can. 3 months earlier, Elena Reyes arrived at that same penthouse, 28, from Oakland, California, with a master in child psychology and a duffel bag that held more books than clothes. The agency profile for Kang Min-jun listed him as a private equity investor. The reality was written in the penthouse itself. 48th floor, panic room behind a bookcase, 4 silent bodyguards who scanned her like luggage, and the little girl, Jae, 6 years old, hiding behind the housekeeper's leg. Her file said shy. Elena's training saw something else. The flattened affect, the hypervigilant eyes tracking the door, the way she flinched at the sudden chime of the elevator. This wasn't shyness. This was a child living in a persistent state of alarm. Min-jun laid out the terms in his office, a room of black marble and cold light. You are here for my daughter. You will ensure she is safe, educated, and quiet. You do not speak to me unless I speak to you first. You do not ask questions about my business. You do not leave the penthouse with her without my explicit permission and a security detail. Your predecessor failed to understand these boundaries. She was removed. Do you understand? Elena understood perfectly. She was being hired not just as a nanny, but as a warden for a little girl living in a gilded cage. The first week was silence. Jae would not speak to her. She would point or nod or simply stare. Elena didn't push. She used what her professors called parallel presence. She would sit on the floor of Jae's immense, toy-cluttered playroom and simply draw, not for the child, for herself, sketches of the view, cartoons. On the third day, Jae slid a red crayon across the floor toward her, a transaction without words. By the end of the week, they were drawing together, a sprawling, silent city on butcher paper. The breakthrough came through Lego. Elena built a tower, deliberately flawed with a weak point. She pretended not to notice Jae watching. Then she knocked it over with an exaggerated sigh. A tiny hand reached out. Jae took a single blue block and placed it at the base of the rebuilt tower, reinforcing the weak spot. Her first act of communication, not a word but a solution. That blue block became a symbol. When Elena found it left on her pillow, she knew it was an offering. A thread of trust. Min-jun was a ghost in his own home. He left before dawn, returned late, often with the smell of cigar smoke and something metallic clinging to his suit. Jae's routine was built around his absence, but the girl listened for the elevator at night. Her whole body would tense, then relax only when she heard his footsteps pass her door heading to his wing. He was not a father who read bedtime stories. He was a looming, beloved storm cloud. Her love for him was absolute and terrified. Elena learned the rhythm of the danger, the extra guards before a meeting, the way Min-jun's chief lieutenant, a man called Seo, would sweep the playroom with a device before Min-jun entered. Once, a bouquet of flowers arrived. Seo took it to another room. Elena heard the snap of latex gloves. The flowers did not reappear. Jae, coloring at the table, didn't look up. This was her normal. Elena's goal shifted. It was no longer about getting Jae to talk. It was about giving her a language for the unspeakable tension she lived in. They used dolls. They used sand trays. Slowly, through play, a story emerged. A story of bad men who made daddy angry, of loud noises that made the windows shake, of a woman. Elena understood this was Jae's mother, who went away in the night and never came back. The official story was a car accident. The story in Jae's play was one of sudden, violent absence. The bond formed in that quiet space of unspoken understanding. Elena became the steady ground in a world that shook. She was the one who explained thunderstorms weren't gunfire. She was the one who sat with her during the panic attacks the housekeeper dismissed as tantrums. She taught Jae to breathe, to feel her own heartbeat, to name the feeling in her chest. It was fear. Naming it gave the girl a sliver of power. Minjun noticed the change, but he misunderstood it. He saw a calmer, more compliant daughter. He saw the drawings pinned in the kitchen, the stable routines. He attributed it to discipline, not healing. One evening he summoned Elena. Jai's grades have improved. You are adequate. He said it like a concession. Elena simply nodded. Inside, she screamed. He saw a well-managed asset. He did not see the child clinging to a life raft. The turning point was a Tuesday. Minjun was home unusually early. He wanted to have dinner with Jai in the dining room, a rare event. Elena was helping Jai choose a dress, feeling the girl's anxious excitement. Then the intercom buzzed. Sio's voice tight. Sir, they're here early. Minjun's expression hardened. He told Elena to take Jai to her room and lock the door, not the panic room, just her bedroom, a lower tier of threat. From Jai's window, they could see the private driveway below. 2 black sedans arrived. Men got out, not the usual suited guards. These men moved with a predatory leisure. The meeting was in Minjun's study, directly below Jai's room. The vents in the old building carried sound. At first it was muffled voices, then a raised voice, Minjun's, a blade of cold anger, a thud, the sound of something breaking, not glass, something heavier, wood, then a gunshot. It wasn't loud, a suppressed pop like a book hitting a thick carpet, but the silence that followed was absolute. Jai froze. Her eyes went wide, not with surprise, with horrific recognition. This was the sound she had always been waiting for. The door to her bedroom burst open. It was Sio, a smear of blood on his white cuff. He didn't even look at Elena. He grabbed Jai, yanking her from the window seat. We have to move, now. He dragged her into the hallway. Elena followed, her own heart a drum. They didn't go to the panic room. They went to a service closet, windowless, smelling of cleaner. Sio pushed them in. Do not make a sound. The door closed, plunging them into darkness. For 47 minutes, Elena held Jai in that blackness. She felt the child's heart hammering against her own chest, felt the tiny body shaking, but no tears, just a silent, seismic tremor. Elena whispered nonsense, promises, anything to fill the void. Jai did not make a sound. When the door opened, the light was blinding. Minjun stood there, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeve ripped. There was a cut over his eyebrow. He looked at his daughter, then at Elena. His voice was gravel. Take her to her room, clean her up. That was all, no comfort, no explanation. As Elena led the shell-shocked girl away, she passed the open door of the study. 2 men in dark coveralls were rolling a thick, dark rug. It was heavy. It left a damp, trailing smear on the polished marble floor. That night, Jai did not sleep. She sat upright in bed, staring at the door. Elena stayed in the chair, watching her. At 3 in the morning, Jai finally opened her mouth. A dry, clicking sound came out. No words. Her voice was gone, locked away behind the trauma. The selective mutism, dormant, had been triggered with full, devastating force. The next morning, Minjun was furious, not at the violence, but at the consequence. What did you do to her? He demanded of Elena. She was fine before last night. Elena tried to explain trauma, triggered responses, the need for a child therapist. He cut her off. You are the expert I hired, fix it. But fixing it required safety, stability, a cessation of the nightmare, none of which he could provide. For 5 days, Elena worked. She used every technique, every gentle prompt. Jai would look at her, eyes full of desperate apology, but no sound would come. The blue Lego block was clutched in her fist constantly. The thread was still there, but it was now a thread in a hurricane. Minjun's solution was to erase the trigger. He had the study completely remodeled within 48 hours. New rug, new furniture, new paint. As if fresh drywall could cover memory. He fired 2 of the guards who had been on duty, a pointless act of scapegoating. The tension in the penthouse was now a wire stretched to breaking. He called Elena to his office 1 week after the incident. The room smelled of new leather. You have failed to correct the situation, he stated. Your methods are too soft. This psychological nonsense. She needs discipline, structure. Elena argued, her professional composure cracking. She needs to feel safe, Mr. Kang. She needs to know that the man who shot a gun in her home won't come back. She needs her father, not a drill sergeant. He stood up, his presence filling the room. You are confusing cause and effect. Her weakness is what invites danger. I will make her strong. You have until the end of the week. If she is not speaking, you are gone. Elena spent those final days not trying to force speech, but trying to build a fortress of nonverbal connection. They signed. They drew elaborate comic strips of a superheroine who fought monsters with silence. They built a blanket fort that was their quiet castle. Jai's eyes were heartbreakingly present, her intelligence flashing, her love for Alina obvious in every cling of her hand, but her voice was a continent away. On Friday morning, Minjun conducted his cruel test. He stood in the playroom doorway and commanded Jai to greet him. "Say good morning, father." Jai stared at the floor, her whole body rigid. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Now," she opened her mouth. A strained, airless whisper emerged. "Nothing." He turned his glare on Alina. "You are dismissed. Pack your things. You will be escorted out in 1 hour." Alina's parting was a quiet agony. She knelt before Jai in the foyer, the bodyguards a wall of indifference nearby. She placed the blue Lego block in the girl's hand and closed her fingers around it. "This is your strength," she whispered. "You keep it, I'll carry mine." Jai's face crumpled, but still no sound, not even a sob, just silent tears cutting through the dust motes in the hallway light. The elevator door closed, and Alina Reyes disappeared from her life. For Minjun, it was a problem solved, an unsatisfactory employee removed. He hired a strict, older nanny from a prestigious agency, a woman who believed in rules and rote learning. The mutism, he was told, would pass with firmness, but it didn't pass, it deepened. Jai retreated further. She stopped drawing. She stopped playing. She would sit for hours, clutching the blue block, staring at the wall. The new nanny reported she was willfully disobedient and sullen. The child psychologist Minjun finally, reluctantly hired, made zero progress. Jai was a vault. And then 3 weeks after Alina was fired, the new nanny witnessed something. She walked past the closed door of Jai's bathroom and heard a sound. A tiny, warbling, solitary voice, singing a song, a lullaby Alina used to sing. The nanny froze, listened, then hurried to tell Minjun. His daughter was speaking, but only when she believed she was utterly, completely alone. That was the moment his understanding shattered. The failure was not Alina's, it was his. He had fired the only key to his daughter's silence. And now, standing in the opulent silence of his penthouse, with a child who was a ghost of herself, he faced the unbearable truth. He would have to beg. His pride cost him 3 weeks. 3 weeks of his daughter's deepening silence, a medical specialist's bill that could buy a car, and a report that stated, in cold clinical terms, prognosis poor without reinstatement of primary attachment figure. The attachment figure he had thrown out. Minjun's first attempt was a phone call. Alina saw the unknown soul number and let it go to voicemail. The message was 30 seconds of stiff, recorded silence before the line disconnected. A power play that failed because he had no power here. His second attempt was a messenger. CEO, the lieutenant, was sent to the small guest house in Itiwan where Alina was staying while she looked for a new job. He offered an envelope of cash, a signing bonus, he called it. Alina handed it back unopened. Tell him money was never the point. That refusal was a grenade in the machinery of Minjun's world. People did not refuse him. Offers were not made twice. Yet here was a woman with a duffel bag and a master's degree, holding a line he could not cross with threats or cash. It forced a tectonic shift in his understanding. This was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. And so, on a rainy Thursday evening, he went himself. No drivers, no guards. Just a man in a black sedan parked crookedly outside the guest house, watching the light in a third-floor window. Alina was packing when the knock came. She expected the landlady. She opened the door to find Kang Minjun, soaked by the drizzle, his tailored suit looking absurd in the narrow, floral wallpapered hallway. He looked less like a crime lord and more like a lost, desperate father. The performance of power was gone. "She is worse," he said, no greeting. "She sings only when she is alone. She sings the song you taught her." Alina leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the calm defiance from the thumbnail, and, "I need you to come back. You fired me for not fixing the problem you created. Why would I come back? Name your price, triple it." Alina shook her head, a slow, sad motion. "You still don't get it. This isn't a bidding war. You cannot purchase her voice back. You have to earn it. And you have to let me do what actually works, which is the opposite of everything you believe in." He stood there, water dripping from his hair onto the worn linoleum. "What are your conditions?" The conditions were not about money. They were a blueprint for a revolution in that penthouse. First, unrestricted access. Elena answered to Jai's needs, not to Minjun's schedule or moods. Second, therapy was non-negotiable. A proper child trauma therapist would be brought in, and Minjun would attend parent sessions. Third, the environment of fear ended. No business meetings in the home, no armed guards in Jai's sightlines. The panic room door was to remain closed and never mentioned. Fourth, he spent 1 hour uninterrupted with his daughter every single day, not overseeing her homework, playing, listening, being present. Minjun listened, his jaw tight. Each condition was a dismantling of his control, an indictment of his fatherhood. And if I agree, then I come back on a trial basis. 1 month, not as your employee, as Jai's advocate. You break one condition, I walk, and you will never see me or hear from me again. And you will have to explain to your daughter why the one person she trusts vanished twice. He looked past her into the small room with its single bed and stack of books. The distance between his world and hers was infinite. You have a deal. The return was orchestrated like a covert operation. Minjun dismissed the strict nanny before Elena arrived. He told Jae that Elena was coming back for a visit. The girl's reaction was not joy, but a wary, desperate hope. When Elena stepped out of the elevator, Jae was standing in the center of the foyer, the blue Lego block gripped so tightly her knuckles were white. Elena knelt. No hugging, no overwhelming gestures. She simply held out her hand, palm up. After a long moment, Jae placed the blue block in it. The thread was reconnected. But the damage of the separation ran deep. The selective mutism was now entrenched. Jae would communicate with Elena through notes, drawings, and an elaborate system of taps and signs they had developed, but her vocal cords seemed physically locked. The trauma therapist, Dr. Cho, a woman with kind eyes and a steely resolve, confirmed it. The mutism is a fortress. She built it to survive. We cannot knock the walls down. We have to show her it's safe to open the gate. The first week back was a silent ballet of rebuilding trust. Elena enforced the new rules with quiet authority. When Minjun tried to bypass her to instruct Jae, Elena would simply step between them, a human shield. You agreed, through me. He would seethe, but he complied. The daily hour of play was agonizing for him. A man who commanded fear sat on a pastel rug, awkwardly trying to assemble a Lego spaceship while his daughter pointed silently to the pieces he needed. It was the most humbling work he had ever done. And then Elena began to uncover the deeper layers. The silence wasn't just about the gunshot, it was about everything unsaid in the house. The ghost of Jae's mother, Sumin, her portrait was in the study, a beautiful woman with a gentle smile. Mention of her was forbidden. Elena found a keepsake box under Jae's bed, hidden beneath blankets. Inside, a faded perfume strip, a pearl hairpin, and a photo of Sumin laughing, holding a baby Jae. When Elena gently asked about it, Jae took out the photo, touched her mother's face, then pointed to her own throat and shook her head. The message was clear. Her mother's story was also silenced. Elena took a risk. She asked Minjun about Sumin during one of their mandated check-ins with Dr. Cho. He shut down immediately. That is not relevant to her current condition. Dr. Cho leaned forward. Mr. Kang, in my experience, a child's silence is often a mirror of the family's silence. What aren't you saying about her mother? The story that finally emerged in fractured pieces was not a car accident. Sumin had been the daughter of a rival, a peacemaking marriage that turned into a genuine, if quiet, love. When a territorial war broke out, she was used as a pawn. She was taken. The official story was a crash to save face, to avoid a war of annihilation. Minjun had gotten his revenge, bloodily and completely, but he had never told his daughter any version of the truth. He had let her believe her mother simply left, abandoned her. The weight of that unspoken grief was a stone on the child's chest. Elena understood then that Jae's mutism was multifaceted. It was a response to the violence she saw. It was a protest against the emotional silence of her father. And it was, perversely, a way to keep herself safe. If she was quiet, if she was no trouble, maybe she wouldn't disappear like her mother. The work became about creating a language for the unspeakable. Elena and Jae began writing a storybook about a brave little girl and her dragon. The dragon was fierce and protective, but also sad and carried a great secret. They drew it together. In the story, the girl wasn't afraid of the dragon. She wanted to understand why it was sad. Minjun found one of the drawings left on the kitchen counter. He stared at it for a long time, his expression unreadable. Progress was microscopic, fragile. Then a new variable entered the equation: external threat. Minjun's world, which he had tried to sanitize for the month, did not respect boundaries. A dispute over a shipping route was escalating. His rivals, the ones who had taken Sumin, were making noises again, testing his focus. Seo reported everything in hushed tones outside the penthouse door, but the tension seeped through the walls. Mori guards appeared. The secure tablet Minjun carried chimed constantly. Elena could feel the atmospheric pressure change. Jae felt it too. She started sleepwalking. Elena would find her standing in the dark hallway, staring at the front door. The fortress walls of her mutism grew thicker. The crisis point arrived from an unexpected direction. It was Minjun's mandated hour. He and Jae were in the playroom, a tense, quiet affair of puzzle pieces. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening. He stood up. "I have to take this." He walked to the window, his back turned, his voice a low, violent growl in Korean. "I said no moves until I authorize. Do you understand? This ends now." He was not just a father breaking a promise. He was the dragon roaring back to life. Jae watched his back, watched the transformation. The gentle, awkward man from 5 minutes ago was gone. She looked down at the half-finished puzzle, a picture of a sunny garden. Then she did something she hadn't done in Elena's presence. She opened her mouth. A thin, reedy but unmistakable sound came out. A word, directed at his turned back. "Liar." Minjun froze. The voice on the other end of the phone kept talking. He slowly lowered the phone, ended the call, and turned around. His face was ash-white. "What did you say?" Jae looked at him, her eyes brimming with a betrayal so profound it gave her a voice. She didn't repeat it, she just stared. The single word hung in the air, more devastating than any scream. He had broken the one rule that mattered: be present. And in doing so, he had proven her deepest fear: his world would always come first, that her safety, her peace, was conditional. He took a step toward her, hand outstretched. Jae. She flinched, a full-body recoil, and then she did what she always did when terrified. She retreated, not into a room, into total, absolute silence. She closed her eyes, shutting him out completely. The gate to the fortress slammed shut, and this time it felt final. Minjun stood there, hands still reaching for a child who had just vanished inside herself. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated horror. He had just been given a miraculous gift, her voice, and he had shattered it with a phone call. He looked to the doorway where Elena stood, having witnessed it all. Her expression held no anger, just a devastating pity. He had failed the test. "Fix it," he whispered, the command now a plea. Elena walked into the room, not towards him, but towards Jae. She knelt beside the girl, a silent solidarity. She looked back at Minjun, her voice low and clear. "I can't fix what you keep breaking. You have a decision to make, right now, the business out there or the child in here. You cannot have both. And if you choose the business, I am taking her out of this penthouse tonight, and I will fight you in every court on earth until she is somewhere safe. Choose." He was caught in the crucible. The phone in his hand buzzed again. The rival, the threat, the empire demanding its king. He looked at his daughter, a statue of sorrow, and then at the buzzing device. The entire narrative of his life, power, control, vengeance, balanced against the silent accusation in a 6-year-old's eyes. He lifted the phone. And then he did the unimaginable. He pressed the power button, held it down until the screen went black. The buzzing stopped. The silence it left behind was louder than any gunshot. He placed the dead device on the windowsill, a tiny, inert slab of glass and metal. Then he turned back to his daughter. He didn't speak. He simply sat back down on the pastel rug, picked up a puzzle piece, and held it out to her, an offering, a surrender. Jae watched his hand, then his face. The fury in her eyes softened into confusion. The fortress gate didn't open, but a watchtower window cracked. She took the piece and slotted it into the puzzle. The sunny garden grew by one small fragment. That was the first revolution, Minjun's choice to be present, but in his world, a vacuum of power is an invitation for chaos. He didn't realize that by silencing his phone, he had not ended the threat. He had simply chosen not to hear it. The consequences were already in motion. Elena, sensing the fragile shift, guided Jae from the room, leaving Minjun alone with the half-finished garden. He sat there for a long time, staring at the bright, stupid flowers. The weight of what he had just done, ignoring a direct provocation from the Jiang syndicate, settled on him like a physical force. He knew the cost. Respect in his business is maintained through immediate, decisive response. Delay is weakness, and weakness is blood in the water. He found Alina in the kitchen later, making tea. "They will interpret my silence as an insult," he said, his voice flat, "or as distraction. They will probe to find the source of the distraction." Alina stirred honey into a mug. "So you're saying that choosing your daughter makes you vulnerable?" "Yes." "Welcome to parenthood," she said, and handed him the mug. It was a gesture so normal, so domestic, it disarmed him completely. The probing began within 24 hours. A small, profitable smuggling route was hit. 2 of his collectors were jumped, their money taken, a clear message, not a robbery. CEO presented the facts, his face grim. "They're testing, boss, seeing if you'll bite." Minjun, from his home office, gave orders that were purely defensive. Secure the assets, pull back, avoid engagement. It was the strategy of a turtle, not a tiger. His men were confused. Rumors began to swirl that Kang Minjun had gone soft, that the heart of his operation was crumbling. The pressure was isolating him. His own organization, a creature of violence and momentum, was starting to question his leadership. And at home, the progress with Jie was glacial. She had said one word, she had not said another. The Dragon's storybook lay open, untouched. The silent hours with her father continued, a daily penance filled with unspoken grief. Then the second revelation. Dr. Cho, the therapist, had been digging. With Alina's cautious encouragement, she had accessed Jai's old medical records from before her mother's death. She found a note from a pediatrician, a routine checkup when Jai was 3. The note read, "Mother reports child is a little chatterbox, very verbal, no concerns." The date of that checkup was 1 month before Sumin's disappearance. Alina connected the dots with a chill. Jai's retreat into quiet had begun not with the recent gunshot, but with her mother's vanishing. The violence she witnessed recently was just a fresh layer of cement on a wall built years ago. The core trauma was maternal abandonment, and Minjun's emotional abandonment, his silence on the subject, his transformation into a distant, fearsome figure, had reinforced it. Armed with this, Alina confronted Minjun, not angrily but with forensic clarity. "She thinks her mother left her, and she thinks you let it happen. And now, every time you choose your phone, your meetings, your war, you are proving to her that she is right to believe she will always be left. Her silence is her way of leaving first, to protect herself from the hurt of being left again." Minjun looked like she had struck him, the business logic he understood. This psychological logic was a maze he was lost in. "How do I fix a lie I didn't tell?" "You tell the truth, your version, a version a 6-year-old can survive." The idea terrified him. Truth was a currency he never spent. It was leverage. It was danger. To tell the truth about Sumin was to expose the wound at the center of his life, to make his daughter carry a burden of vengeance and loss. But the alternative was to let her carry the burden of imagined abandonment, which was already crushing her. He agreed to try. During their next hour in the playroom, with Alina and Dr. Cho observing from the doorway, he began. His voice was rough, unused to this register. "Jai, your mother, she did not want to leave you," he faltered. The words felt like shards of glass in his throat. He pulled the old photo from his wallet, the one of Sumin laughing. "She loved you more than anything. Bad men took her, because of me, because of what I do." He was breaking his own rules, speaking of his world, but it was the only way. "I was too slow, I could not get her back. That is my fault, not hers, not yours. She would be here if she could. She would never choose to leave you." Jai took the photo. She stared at it, then at her father's face, ravaged by a grief he usually kept in a locked room. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just leaned forward very slowly and rested her forehead against his arm, a gesture of shared sorrow. It was the most profound moment of connection they had ever had. The fortress didn't vanish, but a drawbridge lowered just an inch. And that inch of vulnerability was precisely when the external threat struck its hardest blow. While Minjun was emotionally exposed, Seo received an emergency call. The Jiang syndicate hadn't just probed a weak spot. They had found the jugular. They had kidnapped Minjun's aging father, a retired man living quietly in Jeju. The message was simple. You ignore us, we remind you of your priorities, be at the docks at midnight, alone, or we start sending pieces of him back. This was the wait, it gets worse moment. The conflict was no longer about territory or money. It was a direct, personal attack engineered to provoke the old Minjun, the vengeful dragon, back into the open. And it worked perfectly. The father in the penthouse shattered. The crime lord reassembled in his place, cold and lethal. He turned to Elena, all the hard-won softness gone from his eyes. You will take Jae to the panic room. You will stay there until I come for you. Do not open the door for anyone but me or CEO. It was the command of a general. The revolution was over. Elena saw the regression in real time. Minjun, if you go out there guns blazing, you are choosing that world. You are telling her it's more important. You will lose her forever. They have my father, he roared, the sound echoing in the vast space. And you have your daughter, who needs you alive. What is your plan? Go get yourself killed trying to save him. Then she loses both her father and her grandfather in one night. Her logic was a wall he couldn't breach. He was trapped between two irrevocable duties. To save his father, he had to become the monster that was destroying his daughter. To save his daughter, he had to sacrifice his father. It was a choice designed to break him. He paced, a caged animal. Seo waited by the elevator, armed, ready. The clock ticked toward midnight. The penthouse was a tomb of impending doom. And then, from the hallway, a small figure appeared, Jae. She had not gone to the panic room. She stood there in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed dragon from her storybook. She looked at her father, at his terror and fury. She saw the man torn in two. She walked up to him, not to his leg, but to stand directly in front of him. She took his large, trembling hand in both of her small ones, and then she did the impossible for the second time. She used her voice, not a whisper, a clear, small but steady sentence, 3 words. Save grandfather, daddy. Minjun stopped breathing. The world stopped spinning. She wasn't telling him to choose. She was giving him permission. She was acknowledging the dragon, not as a monster, but as a protector. She was speaking not from a place of fear, but from a place of heartbreaking courage. She was offering to share the burden of his terrible world. It changed everything. The mission was no longer a regression into violence. It was a mandate from his child, a sacred duty. He knelt, his eyes level with hers. I will come back, he said, each word a vow. I will come back to you. She nodded once, then she let go of his hand and walked to Elena, taking her hand instead. She had spoken her piece. The gate was closing again, but it had been opened by her own will. What happened next at the docks was not the climactic battle of a gangster film. It was something darker, smarter, and more revealing. Minjun went, but not for a war. He went for a trade. He had brought something the Jiang Syndicate wanted more than his father's life or his own pride: information. For years, he had kept a digital ledger, not of his own crimes, but of the intricate web of police and prosecutor corruption that shielded all the major syndicates. It was a mutually assured destruction device. He offered a specific, damning file on the Jiang's most powerful political protector. The meeting was tense, silent. He handed over a tablet. The Jiang lieutenant scanned it, his face paling. Without a word, Minjun's father was shoved forward, unharmed but shaken. The message was clear: I am not weak, I am strategic, and I have the power to burn your entire world down, not with bullets but with data. Attack my family again, and I release it all. He returned to the penthouse. Just before 3 a.m. he was alive. His father was safe, but he was not the victor. He was a man who had just shown his most dangerous rival his ultimate weapon. The balance of power had shifted into a permanent, precarious stalemate. He went straight to Jai's room. She was asleep in her bed, the blue Lego block on her nightstand. Elena was asleep in the chair beside her. He stood in the doorway, the smell of the sea and diesel fuel still on him, and watched them, the two people who now held every piece of his soul. The next morning, he called a meeting with CEO and his top 3 captains. He announced a restructuring, a move toward legitimate ventures, a gradual, careful distancing from the old ways. It was met with stunned silence, then muttered discontent. The empire was fracturing from within. His choice to save his father through blackmail instead of bloodshed was seen as further weakness by the old guard. A coup was now a matter of when, not if. He had traded immediate external threat for a slow-burning internal one. He had bought his daughter's voice with the stability of his entire kingdom. And as he sat in his office, listening to the whispers of betrayal already snaking through his organization, he understood the final, brutal truth. Saving his daughter meant destroying the man he was, and the destruction of that man would likely get him killed. The path forward was no longer about winning. It was about navigating the ruin. The coup came not with a bang, but with a spreadsheet. 3 days after the dockyard standoff, Min Jun's head of finance presented him with numbers that didn't add up. A systematic diversion of funds. The embezzlement was too bold, too messy to be the work of an outside rival. It was an inside job designed to be discovered, a declaration of war from his own captains. They weren't trying to steal in secret. They were showing him they could, that his control was an illusion. The message was clear. The dragon was bleeding, and the smaller predators were moving in for the kill. Min Jun's response was not what they expected. He didn't summon the culprits for a violent reckoning. He called a full meeting of his organization, not in a back room, but in the conference room of a legitimate shipping company he owned. He walked in alone, no CEO, no guards. He placed the printed spreadsheet in the center of the long table. "I know who did this," he said, his voice calm. "The three of you are sitting at this table. You have 24 hours to return everyone with a 20% penalty. You will then resign your positions with a signed non-disclosure agreement. In return, you walk away with your lives and a severance." Silence, then laughter from one of the captains, a brutal man named Park. "Or what? You'll go to the police." The old threat, the old world. Min Jun looked at him, and for the first time his men saw not fury, but a cold, calculated pity. "No, I will release the corruption ledger, the one I showed the Jangs, but I will release it to everyone, every rival, every mid-level gangster with ambition. I will burn the entire ecosystem we operate into the ground. You will have nothing to take over, just ashes, and you will spend the rest of your short lives running from every man whose protection money just vanished." The room went deathly still. He was not threatening their lives. He was threatening their entire universe. It was a move of absolute, mutually assured destruction. He was willing to annihilate his own kingdom to prevent them from inheriting it. It was the ultimate proof that he was no longer playing by their rules. The dragon wasn't just wounded, it had decided to melt its own gold. The three men complied, the money was returned, the resignations were tendered, but the stability was gone. Min Jun's empire was now a leaking ship, and every capable sailor was jumping off. He began the controlled demolition of his criminal enterprises. Legitimate fronts were sold off or shut down. Illicit operations were wound down, assets liquidated. He was dismantling himself, brick by brick, and the process made him more vulnerable than ever. Through all this, the penthouse became an island. Elena enforced a strict quarantine from the crumbling world outside. No business talk within Jai's earshot. The guards who remained were instructed to change into plain clothes at the door. The playroom, the kitchen, Jai's bedroom, these were demilitarized zones. And in this fragile bubble, something miraculous took root. Jai's voice, unlocked by crisis, began to tentatively emerge in times of peace. It started with Elena, a request for juice, a comment on a drawing, single words, then short sentences. Her voice was soft, husky from disuse, but unmistakably present. She still would not speak to her father directly, but she would speak to Elena while he was in the room. It was a bridge. He would listen, his heart pounding, to the sound of his daughter's opinions on broccoli, on the color of the sky, on the dragon in their story. Dr. Cho's sessions became the engine of healing. Using trauma-informed play therapy, she helped Jai externalize the bad men and the loud noises. They used action figures, sand trays, dolls. Slowly, Jai assigned the doll representing herself a voice. Then, in a pivotal session witnessed by Min Jun through a one-way mirror, she had the daddy doll tell the Jai doll the story about her mother again. And this time, the Jai doll asked a question. Was she scared? Min Jun, watching, had to brace himself against the wall. Dr. Cho, speaking for the father doll, answered, "Yes, but she was brave like you." And then the Jai doll said, "I am brave too." It was a scripted breakthrough, but it was real. The narrative was being rewritten together. The hour of daily play evolved. Min Jun, stripped of his armor, began to learn how to be silly. He built terrible Lego towers for her to knock over. He let her paint his nails a sparkly blue. He told her silly, made-up stories about a clumsy tiger. He was terrible at it, awkward, stiff, but he was trying. And Jae responded not with her voice, but with her presence. She would sit closer. She would lean against him. The flinch response faded day by day. Then 6 weeks after the docks, the final external threat manifested. With Minjun's empire in visible decline, the Jiang syndicate decided to finish the job, not with a direct attack, but with a piece of psychological warfare. They sent a package to the penthouse, addressed to Jae. Inside was a child's music box. When opened, it played a tinkling, distorted version of the lullaby Elena sang, the one Jae had sung alone in the bathroom. And beneath the music box, a photo of Sumin, Jae's mother, with a red X marked over her face. It was a masterpiece of cruelty, designed to trigger the core trauma, to shatter the progress, and to show Minjun they could reach into his sanctuary anytime they wished. Seo intercepted the package, but Minjun saw it. He looked at the photo, at the defaced image of his wife, and something in him didn't break. It solidified. He took the package, not to his office, but to the playroom. Elena and Jae were drawing. He knelt on the floor, placing the unopened box in front of his daughter. "Jae," he said, his voice steady, "bad men sent this to scare you, to scare me. They put a picture of your mother in it. I have not opened it. I will not open it, because we do not open gifts from bad men." He then took the box, stood, and walked to the large incinerator chute in the utility room. He fed the package, unopened, into the flames. He returned, his hands empty. "It is gone. They cannot send their fear into this room. This room is ours." He had not hidden the threat. He had named it, and then he had destroyed it in front of her. He had made her a witness to his protection, not just a victim of his hidden wars. Jae stared at him, her eyes wide. Then she did something extraordinary. She got up, walked to her toy chest, and pulled out her stuffed dragon. She brought it to him and placed it in his lap. Then she climbed into his lap herself, put her arms around his neck, and whispered directly into his ear, her breath a warm puff against his skin. "Thank you, Daddy." It was the first time she had called him Daddy since the mutism began. It was the first full sentence she had ever spoken to him. Minjun closed his eyes, holding his daughter, feeling the weight of the stuffed dragon on his legs. He did not cry. He just held on, as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. That moment became the new foundation. The internal coup had been quashed by mutually assured destruction. The external threat had been met not with counter-violence, but with a unified front of refusal. And the child at the center of it all had begun to speak. Minjun accelerated the dismantling. He used the corruption ledger not as a weapon, but as a bargaining chip. He negotiated with prosecutors, immunity and witness protection for his father and daughter in exchange for his testimony and the ledger itself. It was the ultimate betrayal of his world, but it was the only way to guarantee their safety. The Kang criminal empire would end not with a war, but with a plea deal. The day the prosecutors agreed in principle, Minjun came home and found Elena and Jae in the kitchen, making pancakes. Jae was chattering, a steady, quiet stream of words about bubbles in the batter. She saw him, smiled shyly, and said, "We made you a dinosaur one." It was a burnt, misshapen pancake. It was the most precious thing he had ever been given. That evening he sat with Elena on the penthouse balcony, the city lights sprawling below them. Jae was asleep inside. "The deal is happening," he said. "I will testify. They will put me away, but not for long if I give them everything. My father and Jae, they will go into the program. New names, new lives, far from here." Elena nodded, watching the lights. "She's strong enough now, she'll make it." "You made her strong enough," he said. Then he asked the question that had hung between them for months. "Come with her, be her guardian in the new life. The state will pay you. I will make sure you want for nothing." Elena was silent for a long time. "I can't," she said finally. "If I go with her, I become a permanent part of the witness protection machine, a ghost. And my work is with children like her, not just her. I have to be able to speak about it, to teach what I've learned here. I can't do that from inside a hidden life." He understood. It was the same reason he was turning himself in, to create a clean break, not just a different kind of prison. "Then what will you do?" "I'll stay. I'll work with Dr. Cho, Start a foundation for trauma-informed care for children in situations like this. There are more of them than anyone wants to admit. She looked at him. I'll visit her as often as the program allows. I'll be Aunt Elena, a voice on the phone, a postcard from the world. It was a heartbreaking, perfect solution. She would not abandon Jae, but she would not disappear herself. She was claiming her own story, just as she had helped Jae claim hers. The final week was a series of quiet goodbyes and preparations. Jae was told they were going on a long adventure, just her and Grandpa, that Daddy had important work to do that would keep him away for a while, but that he loved her more than the stars. She accepted it with a child's solemn wisdom. She packed her own suitcase, putting in the stuffed dragon, the blue Lego block, and the completed dragon storybook. On their last night together, Minjun read her the storybook. She had drawn the final page herself, the little girl riding on the dragon, back, not away from danger, but above it, looking down at a tiny, sleeping city. The end, he said. Jae looked at him. Is the dragon happy now? Yes, Minjun said, his throat tight, because the girl is safe. The transfer happened at dawn, unmarked cars, no fanfare. Minjun kissed his sleeping daughter's forehead, then handed her gently to his father, who was already in the car. He clasped his father's hand, a wordless goodbye decades in the making. The cars pulled away, disappearing into the morning mist. He stood on the curb until they were gone. Then he turned, and there was Elena, waiting for him in the doorway of the now-empty penthouse. She held out a simple grey folder. Inside were the contact protocols for the witness protection program, the schedule for his surrender, and a single photo. It was a picture she had taken weeks earlier, unbeknownst to him. Minjun and Jae on the floor, both covered in sparkly blue nail polish, laughing, a real, unguarded, joyful laugh on his face. He had never seen it before. So you remember, Elena said, what you're protecting. He took the photo. What will you tell people, he asked, about this, about us? I'll tell them a story about attachment, about how a child's voice can be locked away by fear and unlocked by safety, about how even the hardest walls can come down if someone is willing to be gentle instead of strong. She smiled, a little sadly. I'll leave out the crime lord parts. Some truths are too strange for fiction. He surrendered to the authorities that afternoon. The news stories were sensational, but brief. The fall of a kingpin, the corruption trials that followed would topple politicians and police chiefs, but that was someone else's story now. Elena Reyes, as promised, stayed. She co-founded the Han River Center for Child Trauma and Resilience with Dr. Cho. Her first published paper was titled Selective Mutism in High-Control Environments, a case study in relational healing. It was read by child psychologists around the world. None of them knew the full context. They didn't need to. The methodology worked. And in a small, sun-drenched house in New Zealand, a girl named Jae, no longer Jae, started first grade. She spoke when spoken to. She had a best friend. She kept a blue Lego block on her desk. Once a week, she had a video call with her Aunt Elena, who always asked about her dragon drawings. And once a month, she received a postcard. No return address, just a drawing of a dragon and a single word in familiar handwriting, brave. The promise of the hook had been fulfilled. The child who wouldn't speak now did. The crime lord who needed the nanny he fired had needed her to save not just his daughter, but the last shred of his own humanity. And the nanny, the expert, had done her job so well she worked herself out of the job, transforming a personal crisis into a universal lesson. Final surprising detail came a year later in a footnote of Elena's second paper. In her acknowledgements, she thanked a research subject, KM, for his invaluable perspective on environmental stresses. Attached to the published paper in the university's digital archive was a de-identified handwritten letter. It read, "You asked me once what changed. You braided her hair, you read her books, you made her pancakes, you treated her like a human being, not a problem to be solved. I treat her, you taught her how to live." KM, it was the only public record of their collaboration, a secret thank you buried in plain sight for turning a penthouse prison back into a home. So what does this story leave us with? Not a fairy tale, but a blueprint. A map of how a human being, locked away by terror, can be walked back to themselves. Jae's voice was not found in a therapist's office first. It was found in the consistent, quiet presence of a caregiver who refused to be afraid of her silence. It was found in the safety of a shared Lego block, a braided story, a pot of pancakes. The clinical term is selective mutism, but the human truth is simpler. When the world becomes too loud with danger, a child's first survival instinct is to build a quiet room inside themselves. The work is not to tear the walls down. It is to sit quietly outside them, day after day, until the child trusts you enough to open the door. Elena Reyes didn't have a magic wand. She had a theory, attachment theory, and the courage to apply it in the belly of the beast. She understood that a secure bond isn't about time, it's about quality. It's the reliability of a response. The certainty that someone will see your fear and not look away. For Jae, that certainty became a rope she could use to climb out of the dark. And Minjun's journey is perhaps the most brutal redemption. He had to learn that true strength isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to be vulnerable despite it. To trade the armor of a crime lord for the exposed heart of a father. His empire was built on control. His daughter's healing required its total surrender. In the end, his most powerful act wasn't a threat or a show of force. It was burning a poisoned gift in a fireplace and saying, "This room is ours." This story echoes far beyond a sole penthouse. It's in every home where a child's behavior is a coded message, where tantrums, withdrawal, or silence are the only languages available for unspeakable stress. The lesson here is profound. Often, the person a child needs most isn't the one with the most authority. It's the one with the most emotional bandwidth, the one who listens to the behavior, not just the words. The nanny, the teacher, the coach, the aunt. These alternative attachment figures aren't replacements. They are bridges. They can build a lane of safety back to the parent if the parent is willing to walk it. Elena's work continues at the Han River Center, transforming the specific pain of one girl into a methodology that helps hundreds. Jae grows up in sunlight, her voice her own. Minjun serves his time, a different man in a different silence. Their story is a testament to a radical idea, that love, practiced with consistency and courage, is a force more formidable than fear. That sometimes, saving a life doesn't look like a heroic rescue. It looks like showing up, again and again, with a blue Lego block and an open heart. If this exploration of silence, trauma, and the quiet power of care resonated with you, delve deeper into the human stories that shape us. Subscribe for more.